So Mega Man X8, huh? Well, we're finally here, so let's just get things started, shall we? While a game that is considered one of my favorites of the franchise, it is surprising to me to see how far it took to actually experience this game growing up and finally being able to cover it for this channel here. Since I never fully owned a PS2 at the time, since I was more of a Nintendo kid growing up, I knew of Mega Man X8 through watching old YouTube Let's Plays back in 2009 and 2010, believe it or not, where it was like the biggest thing on the internet back in the day. Like, shout outs to Clement J64 for literally making my YouTube childhood as best as it possibly could, and I hope you know that. But yeah, this was how I got a taste of what I was missing out from the franchise, as like I've said numerous times already with this series, I only experienced the X collection on the Nintendo GameCube where it only had Mega Man X1 to Mega Man X6. But then right when that Legacy collection was announced in 2018 was where it all changed, as once I got them on both the PS4 and Nintendo Switch, I went straight to play Mega Man X8 to see what I was really missing out. And by the looks of it, it felt like I missed out a ton because I remember starting that game and beating it on the same day because I was simply fascinated by what this game was offering to me for the very first time. Which now here we are 5 years later as I'm revisiting it for this review marathon, seeing if hopefully the feelings kind of remain the same. With how the previous two X games melted my brain, it was clear to me that at the time, Capcom had no real intentions of trying to give the X franchise that same level of love and dedication as they once did back during the SNES or even with Mega Man X4. X6, as spoken back in my review for it, was all about unpolished level design and a lack of a proper focus in its development, which resulted in a game that, while positive in its release, still missed the mark by so much. And Mega Man X7, well, you can forget about that one, as that was a complete mess in attempting a 3D style of platforming that failed as soon as it landed its feet on the ground, and because of it is where, after 2003, Capcom felt that they needed to step it up a notch this time. I mean, you had the Mega Man Zero and Battle Network games already existing around this time, but hey, you don't see me complaining now, do you? Because of that, they decided that for the next entry of the X franchise, and currently the final one, but I'm definitely not salty about that one bit, Capcom went back to the roots of the series, resulting in Mega Man X8 as you see before you. Yeah, X8 is the return to form for the X franchise, as gone are the weird fixed camera angles and in favor of the traditional linear 2D ones. No more vast empty platforming where you can just breeze on by and avoid enemies, as it's back to how the previous games handled in terms of traversal and combat, and everything is back to the traditional gameplay style, which honestly, with how much crap Mega Man X7 had going for its attempt at making X jump to the 3D atmosphere, I welcome it big time alongside the additional things it did just to stand out and be a game for the PS2 at the time. One of these things is the art style of this game, where despite the 2.5D gameplay design, the game's artwork is completely different from the previous games, which to some can be their favorite thing, like myself right here, or others, they just see this as something off. Compared to the previous artworks where X and the gang had these big ass boots and spaceball like helmets, the designs they went for X8 here was to be slimmer and more like a set of action figures as a means to put like a soft reboot for the franchise. And soft reboot is a good term for this game regarding presentation, graphics, and gameplay, because you see that Capcom really wanted to bring back the Blue Bomber in the best way they knew how, while also making sure to keep things fresh in terms of aesthetics. This is partially the reason why I love Mega Man X8 a lot, because it felt like something brand new while keeping the integrity of the franchise, but sadly this resulted in like the lowest profits in terms of sales ever for the franchise, which now almost 20 years later, here we are waiting for a possible Mega Man X9, much like that of a Mega Man Legends 3. Of course, all those things we can talk a little bit more about down the line or in like a separate video, because right now we have a story to cover here, and it's I don't even know anymore. X8 kicks us off with the introduction to the Jakob project, a joint effort between humans and Reploids under the leadership of a Reploid called Lumine, all in order to colonize the moon that, after 7 games, 49 Sigma phases, and roughly 56 Mavericks that the Sunshine Gang has dealt with, yeah, I think I'm starting to understand why they would want to go to space of all places. I mean, it's not like that definitely didn't fail the last time with an entire army force rebellion, or how a virus spread and almost destroyed the world, but hey, who's really counting here? Also, the Jakob project, huh? As in like Jacob's ladder from the Bible? Never thought we would have this in a Mega Man game of all things. So in case it wasn't, I don't know, subtle enough, the themes of X8 seems to be more biblical and mythological this time around in terms of a couple of things here. The idea of colonizing the moon and having this giant orbital elevator to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, the intro stage of X8 being called Noah's Park, okay, that's kind of funny, I gotta be honest, X's armors being called the Icarus and Hermes armors, which we'll cover in details later, Sigma showing up near the end of the game with an entire set of of devil drip for his return, holy hell, and yes, that was indeed a pun intended. Lumine being a literal reference to the angel Lucifer, and his final ability being called Paradise Lost. Like, I gotta be honest here, all of this somehow feels kinda wrong for a Mega Man X game. I mean, yeah, it's a fresh breath of air in terms of referencing something that wasn't done before, but it makes this game feel like it's trying to be something that it really isn't. Like a JRPG, for example. Then again, with this logic, we can say that X and the gang fought a god, which, you know what, sounds pretty funny to me now having said that out loud. Also, in case you didn't know that Sigma would be back, because yeah, he does, or that Lumine would eventually be the bad guy for this game towards the end of it, yeah, it's kinda obvious. Sigma because he's the main bad guy and doesn't really need a reason to show up at this point, which honestly I don't mind because there's not much of an emphasis here as opposed to Lumine, who mostly just steals the show. As the man behind the Jakob project, Lumine clearly doesn't hide the fact that his intentions are clear with what he wants to do with the Orbital elevator, or at least that's what I think he does. Because of the Orbital elevator and the rise of new generation Reploids, Lumine plans to use the project as a means to have a new world for humans and Reploids, which, to add more onto this so-called new world utopia, these new generation Reploids can also have the copy ability like Axel did back in Mega Man X7. Of course, unlike Axel, who uses it to copy any Reploids of his stature, the new generation Reploids copy chips can somehow copy Sigma at will because why not, and to quote Lumine here, they are so-called immune to the Maverick virus. Bullshit! Sorry about that. Listen, I can understand your entire rationale behind a new world and you wanting to destroy older generation Reploids as part of it, but also hide under the guise of building peace between humans and Reploids, but I mean, the dude introduced himself immediately with a bunch of Sigmas marching towards X under a big ass explosion, and you can't possibly tell me he's doing anything of the sort for the sake of peace. And also, by the way, the real reason why the new generation Reploids can copy Sigma is because Sigma was a part of that plan to have their copy chips be the devil trigger to their Maverick status, but that wasn't explained much until the very end when Sigma calls them their children, which is just... why? But now, the game really starts where the project was placed on hold when Lumine gets captured by Maverick forces under the leadership of Vile, who this time really is living up to the Boba Fett name with the green color palette and fully plans an entire rebellion in the process. And when he showed up, I honestly couldn't help but laugh because Vile plays the whole idea of how they've been fighting against each other for a very long time, having the whole, well, if it isn't my arch nemesis, when the last time we fought him, he was wearing a beetle shield on his back in Mega Man X3, and that was like 10 years ago based on release dates. Arch nemesis my ass, but go off, Boba Fett. Naturally, as a response to this outbreak, X, Zero, and Axel strap on their boots and deal with 8 more Mavericks, and the rest is just what you would expect with a franchise, but I mean, it's kinda all over the place if I'm being honest. Unlike my sentiments with X7 where it played off as a whatever story that built itself with presenting a new character, X8 tries to latch onto the continuity of the X series and tries to add onto it with the best that it can. This is done with references to previous games through in-between cutscenes with the Maverick Hunters and their recollections of their previous fights with Sigma. Axel being a focus also like that of X8, which again, like that game doesn't go anything beyond the possibility of him being Maverick like the new generation Reploids. Lumine with Vile and their somewhat backwards plan to start the whole Maverick Rebellion and New World Utopia, it's all just convoluted with no real solution to the end. Especially with how that game ends with a cliffhanger. Yeah, I think it left me with more questions than answers. At least I gotta give props to the voice acting here because they actually gave a damn about performing their voice lines well, and you see their personalities really shine through for the most of it. Nothing to complain, and I love how Mark Gatha gives X the proper voice of reasoning and resolve to do the things that he needs to do, as well as the rest of the cast to really have something of value here other than whatever X7 was doing, despite me liking that voice cast. But you know what, X8 is mostly the gameplay at the end of the day, and after covering 7 console games and 2 handheld ones, I don't really need to stress too much about what you can do because at that point, it's just a given. And with X8 specifically, seeing that they went back to the roots of the franchise, I gotta say, I loved what Capcom did for this game, and I think they did a pretty good job with the whole 2.5D gameplay style here. To start there, the graphics and performance felt so fresh to see for an X game, though of course we can argue it's because of the Legacy Collection, which is how I am playing these games, but even when looking at older footage of the PS2 original, it still looks just as nice and pleasant to the eyes. Again, it's no Final Fantasy X or Metal Gear Solid 3, but at least compare the visuals of Mega Man X7, it is night and day with theme aesthetics, animation, controls, and of course that art style that I mentioned previously. Though to kinda give it a peg down a bit, I will say that after playing a game like 30XX recently where that game presented high quality sprite work, there have been moments in Mega Man X8 in hindsight that does feel rather static and unpolished. This is mostly in terms of the animation at some points, as well as the movement and that general Mega Man-like appeal, if you know what I mean, but besides all of that, the rest looks about as good as it can get for the X series at the time. Music is something that I also gotta compliment right out the gate too, because it also makes X8's identity shine through as both a PS2 title and of course that of a Mega Man game. It's got the rock and roll beats back with a stronger emphasis of heavy rock when dealing with Mavericks, and presents this looming presence of action, danger, and just what the X series was always known for back on the SNES. Like, the Maverick theme for this game is just the best one yet, either first or second to X5's Maverick theme, depending on if you catch me in a good mood or not, because it just knows damn well how to deliver on a proper boss fight. Stage design and layouts were also a welcome treat for X8, as it was like wearing a pair of cozy socks again that brought you back to simpler times, or whatever the hell that analogy meant anyways. I loved breezing through the game's stages as they presented what the X franchise was known for without so much compromising with the artistic choices that they made here, resulting in a perfect blend of new and old that is both stylish, on brand, and just as good to play, period. Favorite stages of mine were easily Noah's Park, because I felt like it was a good intro stage that got the ball rolling, as well as introduced the mechanics of each character without so much slowing much of the pace. Booster Forest was fun because we got the right armor for that stage, but you don't really need it for it to traverse through it, and it is a nice pick-me-up if you want to use it for the stage. And the stage design also kind of gave this airy vibe to the game that normally you don't find it in most of the X series besides Storm Owl's stage back in Mega Man X4 or even the Skyver in X5, and the music for it, especially when riding the right armor, is just amazing, man. Pitch Black had this Metal Gear Solid vibe where you can go through it silently like a stealth mission, or just turn on the lights and treat it like a regular infiltration. Like, it's so unique, and kinda wish previous games did this looking back. Primrose, say what people have to say about the spikes, the colors and the gravity gimmick it had for it was something that I didn't really mind in all honesty. Sure, less could have been more with the spike department, let's be real, but it offered challenge and that's fine by me. Troia Base was a fun set of challenges that had me coming back constantly because of how fun it is to get the highest score in its little challenge rooms, though some of the platforming could have been better here, but hey, as a bonus, you can get Cutman as a special boss. Basically, all of these stages were fun and easily good ones that I can say bring out the best of the X franchise, and with that 2.5D elements, they bring a level of charm that truly encapsulates the franchise to a very good degree. But in some of the levels though, man, do I wish they gave us more to offer, or they try to pick up the pace every now and then. The Ride Chaser segments are notorious for this, where while we get two stages with them, one in Dynasty and another in Central White, they are slow to move around and it feels like they drag at times to where it loses out on the fun of them. Central White is like the biggest example, where it tries to replicate Mega Man X4's Jet Stingray's stage, with it having two acts of the Ride Chaser segment, making this like a long stage that gets so boring with a lack of obstacles in your way to try to make it challenging besides these bottomless pits here. And if you don't have X in your party, then you would have to repeat the level so that you can get the armor part for him that's located near the end of the level. Yeah, that's a thing by the way, which is just stupid. Burn Rooster stage Inferno also does this with how monotonous it is to deal with a slow platforming on like 3 separate occasions, and then have this weird in-between segment with instant skill spikes littered about. Like, I definitely didn't really like this stage at all. And Sigma's Palace near the end, god, hope you're a fan of even more spikes, because that's literally what the second half of that stage is. Like, what the hell happened with the budget here, Capcom? God damn. Mavericks in this game are a pain in the ass, unlike before at least, where regardless of having the weakness for them or not, they're just as fun to beat as the previous games. And hell, with their weaknesses, it makes the fight go even faster, but you also have to watch out for this second phase once they lose a huge chunk of their health, where it's a matter of learning a new pattern before cracking them up like an egg and folding them like an omelet. The final bosses were pretty cool too, and quite challenging to a degree compared to the previous games. Like, Sigma really clapped my cheeks this time around, really making this a good boss fight with good obstacles in my way, and the level of aggressiveness he has here is just one of the best there is, easily top 5 Sigma fights in my opinion. And I especially loved how it wasn't just a Sigma fight to finish the game too, as after he was dealt with, Luminate would show up to throw some hands as well, and hey, wait a minute, are those Chaos Emeralds? God, holy crap, the sonic brain rot is real. But besides all these praises and low points though, X8 doesn't go beyond the 2D style gameplay besides playing it safe, which to me hinders the overall quality this game has, but not much to a huge extent as some would say. I mean, as long as you can run, jump, wall climb, beat a boss, and get a move on without having to go through 20 different menus, then it's all good at the end of the day, but I just wish it had a little bit more to offer. In terms of the new stuff that Mega Man X8 does have, it makes the game stand out from the previous entries, and the best way I can describe this is by saying that X8 kinda has this arcade feel to the overall game structure. While the gameplay is 2D, the combat and the way that characters are treated with their movesets feel like it's from an arcade beat 'em up, where you now more than ever really want to attack enemies as you get to have this combo meter in the upper left screen while clearing each stage. And the more enemies you beat, the more you collect this currency called medals, which are used to upgrade the gang through the R&D department, acting as like the hourglass lady from Devil May Cry, where you can power up the gang in the process. But yeah, so unlike the hard tanks and E-tanks that are scattered about in every stage like in the previous games, they can be bought for in the shop system here and give X and the gang all sorts of permanent health upgrades, weapons, and all kinds of goodies with the help of Douglas as before. Wait, you're not Douglas? Hell, now that I think about it, what exactly happened to Douglas? Because bro dipped after Mega Man X6. Not that I forgot to mention this or anything, but X8 offers the assistance of 2 new navigators alongside the returning Alia that help with certain conditions of each stage. You got Alia, who's known for the usual. She tells you the stage and the boss, and you just go about the level as you would in the previous ones. Love her design in this game, by the way. Then you got Layer, my personal favorite, which is probably because of the underboob design now that I think about it, who specializes in boss weaknesses and how to tackle a boss. Though she doesn't do much in this regard since, you know, a basic Google search will give you the answer or trial and error, but it is nice to see a new face joining in alongside Ailey at least, since she was feeling rather lonely in the navigation department after all. Also, love how in the cutscenes when Layer interacts with the gang, she has this soft spot for Zero, but doesn't go anywhere with it. But you know what, it's still nice to see that these guys have feelings for each other. And by the way, Zero, look at her, my dude. How the hell are you fumbling this hard? Like, get over Iris already, that was 4 games ago. Lastly, we have Palette, who, regardless of what you think of her design, she deals with locating hidden items and routes, primarily the armor parts for X and these rare medals to collect in each stage. Now, because of footage reasons, I did record some of her voice lines just to get an idea of how she works for the game, but if you have played an X game before, you honestly don't have to rely on her at all, because let's face it, you're gonna go search for those secrets yourself anyways. Plus, out of the 3 navigators, she's also like the most annoying to hear. Like, god, as if Alia from X7 wasn't annoying enough, looks like they gave that role to Palette instead.
Here's some information. Listen to me. There's some
You're able to choose between the 3 amigos from the beginning, unlike X7, and like that game, you can swap between the 2 characters on the fly without having to deal with some BS in between. In certain cases, there even is this little rescue mechanic where if one of them are caught in a trap or something, the other can be called into action to tag and break them free, keeping the pace somewhat intact. And because of the return to 2D, I appreciate the entire trio as a whole now, as we see X and Zero back to the semblance of the original playstyles, and Axel here feels a bit more fun to utilize. He's got his trusty gun like before, but similar to base in the Mega Man original games, he can rapid fire in all directions, but he stays in place while doing so, which is the only gripe I have with him, because in X7, he moved as he shot his enemies, even if there was like that auto lock feature in place. However, because X can do most of the heavy lifting in regards to long range options, Axel was one that I often used for arbitrary means and to at least get rid of some Mavericks and enemies faster with that rapid fire ability as on top of his special weapon gauntlet. Holy crap, my man was packing heat with this one. With X and Zero, I have what I remembered seeing them as in the previous games, except they did feel a bit limited in their animation and movement. I guess because the game is built in 3D in a 2.5D style, there isn't much fluidity as you would see with the sprite work animations from the PS1 games, but regardless, they play way better than in X7 by a long run. Zero in this game is just back to how he was with some additional perks to collect, like these cool weapons he has in his arsenal alongside his usual saber and double jump. Loved how they brought back his arsenal from the previous games too, with like Dark Mantis special ability, he has the spinning attack, and with his D-Glade weapon, aw yeah, now that's the Zero I remember. X, like in X7, has the air dash by default now and can use his special weapons for Maverick weaknesses and occasionally finding the light capsules, which, Yeah, that was mostly what I used for the special weapons now that I think about it. I mean, the special weapons have no real utility unless it's for those hidden goodies, and while it sucks wishing there could have been more to work with here, it helps with the boss encounters at least, where it's not a waste of time dealing damage unlike whatever the hell they tried doing with X7. And with the armor sets that X has going for him in this game, I have to say, this is actually one of my favorite things about X8 as a whole, at least in terms of armor part usage. In Mega Man X8 here, it lets you swap between two different pieces of armors from two sets called the Icarus and Hermes armor, where one deals with more offense while the other deals with better crowd control and platforming. You also get to use the parts immediately like before, which thank God, and you also get to choose how you want to tackle the stage if you pick X with certain armors. Do you want a higher jump or a stealth dash? How about a giant laser or a spread shot beam? Or how about higher defense or almost complete invulnerability? Yeah, these armors, they're just cool and easily top tier for me in terms of it if I were to rank them at some point. But of course, you can also still obtain the ultimate armor via a cheat code or if you grind your ass off with metal collecting, but it's still something nice and way beneficial than whatever the hell the glide armor was again back in X7, Jesus. But make no mistake also that Axone Zero doesn't have anything up their sleeves since they do get some perks and armor-like benefits to them as well. With Zero, he gets the returning Black Zero armor, giving him stronger power and defense like before, which is pretty great. I always loved the design for Zero since Mega Man X4, and I'm glad to see a return here as well. And Axel even has the White Axel armor, which honestly is just a Luminate color swap, which I guess makes sense considering the ending of the game, but at least he gets something to his name since dude showed up in 2 games and almost got yeeted in 1. There is simply something for everyone here, but of course this isn't for a one-time playthrough as the game has a New Game Plus mode feature where you can keep everything from the previous file and just replay the game however you please. Again, this does add into the nature of the arcade style elements of this game, but in the most beneficial ways possible because you won't have to load a new save file you want to 100% collect everything since you can all just do it in one. However, that's also the biggest issue that I have with X8 because while this game is a brilliant 2D side scroller that brings out the best of what the X series offered, the game suffers tremendously from having to be this sort of collectathon that oftentimes make me regret even coming back to this game in the first place. For some reason, X8 has this looming threat of trying to collect everything that it overstimulates my brain and sometimes I just don't feel like replaying it. Like, it has so much crap to collect here, you guys, on top of the armor parts, the rare metals, and even the ability to play as the navigators as a special bonus, which requires a grind fest if you want to get them. I mean, yeah, I spent way too much time playing this game, but you know what? I'll at least do it for my homegirl Alia here. And maybe Layer, but that's gonna be off screen, my guy. Like I said, I got my priorities here, mother.
Here goes nothing.
With all that said, now, what exactly is my stance with Mega Man X8 here? Well, I am glad to say that I actually really enjoyed this game way more than whatever the hell Mega Man X7 was. Like, yeah, that's for sure. My general thoughts with Mega Man X8 is that without a shadow of a doubt, it deserved way more than what it got from Capcom and in terms of its low sales when it released. Again, after the failures of both X6 and X7, X8 improved so much on what worked on those games and really gave a satisfying 2.5D experience that, yeah, doesn't feel as great as Mega Man X4 by comparison, but it still felt fine as a game overall. Like, if I was ranking these games, for example, X8 would be my 3rd favorite X game of all time, being second to X1, and of course X4 taking the #1 spot because it's just a good Mega Man X game, what can I say? This game just stands out well, but then remembering that this game also released in 2004, what more can I say really? And that's what kinda sucks too, because this game also showed us a glimpse of what could have been the X series moving forward, but again, with the poor sales despite positive reception, Capcom just had this shelved and here we are now in 2023 with the Legacy Collections, but there's not much else with the franchise. Speaking of the Legacy Collections here for a second, now that I think about it, considering that this was how I played these games, I cannot stress enough the fact that you should absolutely get these collections while you can. They are always going to be on sale at times, first of all, alongside with other Capcom stuff, and trust me, you won't regret playing these games at all. Okay, maybe X6 and X7, but I think that just depends on what your gaming preferences are, to be honest. And man, I just hope that in the future we could get something new and awesome for X soon. Maybe like a Mega Man X9 that I sure hope Capcom makes one day, on top of that Mega Man Legends 3. I just know they have that in the vault alongside Marvel vs. Capcom 2 ports, I just know it. But this is how it ends, huh? This is how we finish off the Mega Man X marathon, with a game that was good in my eyes, but absolutely deserved better. But man, was this a fun ride though, the more I look back on this game, and the entire marathon itself, now that I think about it. For a whole ass year and a half, more or less, I dedicated myself to the Mega Man X franchise, and while there are tons of other videos like my discussions and video essays in the bunch, I still felt like this series were by far my favorite videos to make. They sure as hell don't have any good impressions, I totally get that, but looking at my first Mega Man X review till now, it sure seems nostalgic, and I kinda like having that feeling. It was super fun going back to the first NES game to then gushing about my favorite of the franchise, then having to go into complete meltdown in between two of them before uncovering a hidden gem in the handheld setting. You know, all these videos really showcase all those emotions in the bunch. And who knows, maybe this might end up being the big break that I always wanted the channel to have, but obviously we're gonna have to wait and see when this video airs. So for right now though, I want to say thank you guys so much for, being a part of this ride for the Mega Man review marathon. It was really fun, really going back to this, like I said. Truly incredible experience, and I know that the next big series that I want to cover next, obviously Capcom related, is the Ace Attorney franchise. Primarily the trilogy, the Phoenix Wright trilogy first, and then we'll see about Apollo Justice down the line. But for sure, as 5K sub special, I did say I wanted to tackle those games, so that's going to be the big series that I'm going to be tackling next. So stay tuned for that one, and probably the usual stuff in between. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But until then though, thank you guys so much for watching this video. See you all with that next one. Have fun, do your usual YouTube stuff. I don't know, like when it comes to these outros, I kind of give up at this point, because I don't know if you're actually watching until this point or you really care about all this kind of stuff. But you know what, do what you gotta do. I'll organize myself next time for a better outro and things like that. But just do what you have to do, alright? Also, Capcom, please give us Mega Man X9 already. Like, goddamn, like it's about time that we get another numbered entry.